At a college football game, the cheerleaders launched T-shirts into the air with a T-shirt cannon from the ground upward at a rate of 128 feet per second. The equation for the height of a T-shirt can be modeled with the equation y equals negative 16x squared plus 96x, where x is the number of seconds. For what values of x is the height of a T-shirt at or above 128 feet?
Press pause and answer the question.
This is a great question, right? So we have this T-shirt, and we're going to launch it into the air. And anytime we launch something into the air, if we kind of ignore friction from the air, we wind up with something that looks like a parabola. And so you know it's going to be something like this. And what we're asking is, we're saying, for what values of x? Now, x is how many seconds? So x is on the x-axis. And so if we say, okay, after a certain number of seconds, it'll be at 128 feet. And it's going to keep going up, 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 and then it's going to come down, and eventually it'll be below 128 feet. And it's launched from the ground, so there's this nice kind of symmetry where it goes up and then it goes back down, beginning at x equals 0 seconds. And our question is, when is this bigger than this? So we can rewrite the equation. It was y equals negative 16x squared plus 96x. But we want to say, okay, that y describes the height, but we want that height to be bigger than 128 feet. So we say, okay, if it's bigger than 128 feet, that means it's greater than or equal to 128 feet. And I say greater than or equal to because it says for what values of x is the height of a T-shirt at or above. At or above means greater than or equal to. And so we want to know, when does that work? So we can say, okay, we know that the height is represented by this, and we know that this line is 128 feet. So when is the height bigger than 128 feet? And so we can write it as 128 is less than or equal to negative 16x squared plus 96x. Now that's the hardest part of the problem, is kind of laying that out. How did I know to do that? Well, 128, and I know that my height is bigger than 128, so when does that happen? At what x values? Now we can kind of do what we do with an equation. So we'd like to get all the numbers on one side and a 0 on the other. So we can go ahead and subtract 128 from both sides, and we get 0 is less than or equal to negative 16x squared plus 96x minus 128. Now again, you can have your calculator just figure out what the factors are right there. So what are the values of x that make it equal to 0? And that'll save you a lot of time. Take a look at our calculator tutorial. But this part here, I'm going to kind of go through it the old-fashioned way just so you see how it was done. So one of the first things we can do, and it may not be obvious to you, but 16 actually goes into 96 cleanly, and it goes into 128 cleanly. So let's just get rid of that negative 16 at the beginning and make it into a much cleaner formula. So we'll take a negative 16 out. Now 16 happens to go into 96 6 times. And so negative 16 goes into 96 negative 6 times, and it goes into negative 128 8 times. So we can change this formula here into this one here, where 0 is less than or equal to 16 times x squared minus 6x plus 8. And we can multiply both sides by 1 over negative 16. Or another way to say that is we can divide both sides by negative 16. So this side becomes 0, and this side becomes x squared minus 6x plus 8. But wait, we just divided by a negative number. And this is the one thing where we can't really treat an inequality like greater than or less than in the same way we can treat an equal sign. Because if it was an equal sign, we would multiply by negative 1 over 16, or we divide by negative 16, and everything would stay the same. But if we multiply or divide both sides of an inequality, of a greater than or less than kind of situation, then we have to flip the sign. So where the sign used to go like this, to show that this was bigger than 0 or equal to 0, now we're going to flip it, and we're going to say it's less than or equal to 0. But now we can say, okay, now what makes 8 where you multiply them and when you add them together makes -6? And it turns out that a -2 and a -4, well, you add them together, that makes -6, and you multiply them, that makes 8. So what we can do is we can say that this 0 is greater than or equal to x minus 2 and x minus 4, one times the other. And so you have values that you have to worry about on your number line right here at 2 and 4. And so the question is it a situation where x is like this one, where x is greater than or equal to 2 and less than or equal to 4? That looks promising. Or is it this one, where x is less than or equal to 2 and x is greater than or equal to 4? Well, this one is a problem. When x is less than or equal to 2 and greater than 4, the way we've written that makes it look like 2 is greater than 4 through the transitive property, but that's not true. 2 is not greater than 4. And so the one we actually want is this one, where x is bigger than 2 and less than 4. And we can try 3 in there, and we see that 3 minus 2 is 1, and 3 minus 4 is -1. And we multiply them together, we get -1. And -1 is, in fact, less than or equal to 0. So we can see that right here, kind of in between the 2 and the 4, and we're going to fill those in because we have greater than or equal to, we can see that that works. And that makes sense too, right? We're launching a t-shirt in the air. It really wouldn't make sense if it were out here above 128 feet, because then it would somehow like start at more than 128 feet and then go down like this and then back up. But that's not how t-shirts launch with gravity. T-shirts, of course, launch like this. So we know that if we want it to be above a certain height, it's going to be in between the two values that we factor out. It's unlikely to be outside, and if it were outside, that would create a question for us.